Hey everybody, Mike with Games Play Badly, and on this episode of Session Zero, I have Nagi, and he has a game that is kickstarting right now called BURNAWAY. Now, this pits the players against some vengeful spirits who are wreaking havoc across the city, and you and your team are investigating, trying to figure out how to either exorcise them or to get them to go away. And did I mention that they're combustible? So that is can be pretty terrifying, I would imagine. It deals with some other things such as loss and sacrifice and what you'd be willing to do to make these particular spirits go away. So it makes it a very interesting storytelling mechanism. Interview is going to be up on our website as well, and that is gamesplaybadly.com. You can go ahead and search there through all of our content. And if you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe. That really helps us out and lets us know we're on the right track so we can create some more content for you. So Nagi is right around the corner, and I can't wait for you to meet him. That interview starts now. Hey Nagi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. We've been talking for the last couple of weeks about your new project, and I read through what you sent me, and I think it's very interesting. It has a lot of possibilities, and it is it's all about the choices that we make in various situations and what you're willing to sacrifice over what you're willing to save.
Yeah.
And I found it a very interesting concept. Why don't you tell our audience all about it?
Yeah. So right now, we have a funding campaign going for a tabletop game that I have been creating over the past couple years. It's called BURNAWAY, and the subtitle is an RPG about loss and hope from the ashes.
Mhm.
So the general concept is that in sort of a slightly more dystopic near future, there are these spirits called embergeists, and they're different from normal spirits in that they're kind of their grief, their emotions that are holding them to this world become so intense that their ectoplasm, or what the material parts of them, actually combust. And they don't stop combusting, and basically they burn down the places that they're haunting. So the regular firefighters can't really do anything about it because they're not trained to fight basically inferno ghosts. So instead, what you have is these privately contracted mercenaries who aren't quite firefighters, but basically have to be firefighters. They have to be detectives. They have to be, like kind of like a bunch of different things to go in and deal with the Embergeists so that they can basically either remove the Embergeist through exorcism, or basically by figuring out what its deal is, who it was before, and kind of encourage it to kind of pass on its own. And those are all choices that you make as players in this game.
Yeah, so and that's a very interesting concept. Now, it's a game for recommended 2 to 6 players.
Yep.
You mentioned is there a campaign going on right now funding it?
Yes, yeah, we got it up on Kickstarter.
Okay, so everyone take a look down below. I will make sure that I have the links and everything there. I love the concept of the Embergeist because I thought that was a very interesting way to bring in, hopefully not insulting, but kind of like a Cthulhu-esque aspect to the game where you're dealing with supernatural events that are happening. And I like the detective work that can be done to go ahead and get these Embergeists to go away. It sounds like it should be a good time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that the map of the mission that you play is actually pretty central to the character's decision making. So every mission that you play, you're going to be in a location, whether it be a burning building or a factory or whatever. It's some place that is on fire, and the idea is that you're moving to different areas within the location, and that requires cost, movement, and time and stuff like that. So the layout of the location is actually quite important for all players to be able to keep track of and look at. So it's not like a full-on board, but I mean, there is a map. There's a central map that people are looking at.
Yeah, so it would be very typical as if you're going on any adventure and you needed a map.
Yeah.
So can you run me through a quick overview of what a scenario would look like?
Yeah. So sessions are broken down into three distinct phases. So there's the briefing, the mission, and the aftermath. And the briefing is basically where, kind of like I like to kind of think of it as like you can think of it as like almost like an episode of like a procedural
Hmm.
thing where it's like, oh, you meet your characters and they get briefed on the case that's happening, right? That's where they get
Hmm.
all the details of like, an Embergeist appeared at, this X, Y, and Z place, and here are the details that you know. And that's
Hmm.
kind of where, the characters will choose their loadouts, they decide what equipment they're taking and kind of like get themselves all prepared. If you have new characters coming in, this is where you introduce them. And
Hmm.
then you move into the mission, which is, the meat of the gameplay, where you're moving around, you're trying to rescue people, you're trying to defeat the Embergeist, all that stuff. And then
Hmm.
once the mission is over, whether you've succeeded or failed,
Hmm.
you move on to the aftermath, which is basically that's where kind of the more role playing heavy stuff comes in, where you can either choose to process the grief that you have incurred in the mission, which is one of the essential mechanics. So the character can basically try and process some of the things that they've seen or done or failed to do, or they can form bonds with their characters where they kind of have a role playing scene together, and you kind of like hash out what your character's relationship is, and that actually gives you mechanical benefits going on. And
Hmm.
then like at the very end, the last thing you do is called coming to terms, where you basically make this roll where your grief is a factor, and if you fail, you actually kind of have a permanent like consequence essentially. And
Hmm.
it's it's tricky because with this kind of game where grief and tragedy are very main themes, you don't want to be insensitive to like actual real life situations of grief and
Sure.
tragedy. So I want to walk that line of encouraging people in a safe space to explore this kind of thing without having it be triggering or being insensitive to these kind of
Hmm.
topics. So the kind of thing of encouraging people to really dive deep into their characters and think, is this character, how is this, intense experience going to affect, the outcome? Are they going to, change how they interact, how they approach certain situations? Is it going to affect, their motivation to carry on? Is it going to, like, are they going to decide, all right, I'm done, I'm retiring, I can't deal with
Right.
this anymore? So
Hmm.
I think those are all very valid, answers to the things that happen. And I think like the decision that you make is really where the interesting engagement of the system lies.
Hmm. Well, one of the things I read in the press release that you gave me was
Yeah.
this is really intended as more of a one shot or a short campaign
Hmm.
um, system.
Hmm.
So outside of the one shot, how so you just continue on after you've processed everything and you've gotten maybe permanently scarred, you know,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
go on to your next mission um with these basically like a PTSD type effect.
Hmm.
And so that makes the next mission more difficult, I would imagine.
Yeah, for in some ways. Well, that's kind of the balancing factor. So that I mentioned the aftermath that earlier in that stage you can process grief. So
Hmm.
basically, if you process grief, you can actually reduce the amount of like grief you are holding because grief carries over between sessions. So, if your
Mm,
character's kind of person that's just like, keep it all down inside, don't think about it, just kind of keep moving, it actually builds up. And, each time, each session, you have to come to terms with things. And the more grief you're holding, the more grief you have, the more likely it is that you're going to start basically taking burns, which are essentially kind of the permanent effects
mm,
of the, this lifestyle, these,
sure.
these things you're encountering.
Yeah, I actually really like that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of sanity points. You know, so
Yeah.
you're looking at that. You know, how much could your character take seeing all of this death and destruction, and also
Mhm.
processing the grief for, you know, let's say that you're counseling um ambergeist.
Embergeist, yeah, yeah.
So let's say you're counseling an Embergeist to get it to stop doing what it's doing or leaving. Through that
Mhm.
process, you're going to learn a whole bunch of backstory, right? So
Yeah,
there are going to be some very traumatic things that are holding um, holding them where they're at. So I think there's
exactly.
a really interesting aspect of being able to role play and I think it's there is an innate ability to really drag people into this and make it really gritty.
Yeah. Oh,
Now, and I don't
absolutely.
mean that in a bad way, but I mean I think it's not something where you can sit at the table and be like, yeah, I'm gonna roll a 20. But nah. I mean, no, you're mentally invested in this
Mhm.
by the end of it. So I like the idea very much.
Excellent.
So oh, uh hold on for one second.
Yeah.
So let me think about this. So your project is currently going right now. Once you're
Yeah.
funded, what are you looking at production time wise?
Well, the mechanics of the game are like we've got a full-on test play, ready to go. We unfortunately weren't quite able to get all the actual plays set up that we had been wanting to do before the
Hmm.
campaign started, because as you probably know, the TTRPG space is a little bit crazy right now. So I think everyone's
Hmm.
schedules are wild.
Yeah.
But basically, there are still a couple chapters that I have to finish writing for the game, and
Hmm.
but like that's not a big thing. It's not something I'm concerned about. So once the book is done, we have a printer lined up, and hopefully there won't be any delays there. Of course,
Right.
it's
Right.
even though it's technically past the pandemic, there's still shipping delays, all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and aside from that, we are hoping that we are or we're going to be able to reach our stretch goals where we're going to be able to bring on a couple more guest writers who can, use their own writing experience to design really cool Embergeists and
Hmm.
missions and just concepts like that. Because, I mean, for me, it's interesting because, I very much think of myself as like a solo writer where I just write the whole game and this is my idea and it's done. And this is kind of the first time I've experienced working with other writers in a kind of
Hmm.
collaborative sense.
Yeah.
And it's
Not
actually
easy to do.
no, no. That's the thing is that it's a little bit of struggle for me because I know that one of the things, one of my quirks is that I like to have kind of control and ownership over my creative stuff. So it's like it's been a process of being like, all right, it's fine to let these other people, like mess around with this and like contribute to it, and it's going to make the product better, because
Right.
it's like it's not, once the game is out there, it's not fully mine anymore. It's whoever plays it and makes stuff for it and writes stuff for it and plays in it. So that it's yeah, it's been very cool, kind of like meeting those other people who have experiences with different aspects and areas of the RPG world, and it's like, what are you going to bring to the table? What how your experience is going to inform how you write
Hmm.
Embergeist stories or stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I love about games is once they're placed in the hands of the players
Hmm.
and watching what they do with that. That is a mark of a good game. If
Yeah.
people get into it and they can immediately think about, yeah, I already have a scenario kind of cooked up for this. It sounds like when you already get those creative juices flowing, and once somebody actually gets it, actually watching somebody produce something
Hmm.
is pretty incredible, and it's got to be very
Yeah.
gratifying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because it's like my in my previous game, Stars Fall Up, that was obviously not a huge release.
Mm,
I sold it at a couple of zine fairs. I used my pretty meager social media network to
hmm.
like try and advertise it as much as I could. And for what it was cool that I at least sold some copies. And it was just like a really interesting and gratifying experience to meet, like in person. The first person is like, I bought your game and I'm really excited about it, and it kind of inspired me to start doing stuff on my own. It's like, wow, that's a even if it's just one person, that's like such a
Right.
incredible, like, just situation.
Yeah. So how long was this game in development?
It's hard to say for sure. It was in my head for quite a while, and then
Hmm.
for a little while longer it was notes on my computer, and then I like to kind of consider the origin point as like being like, all right, I have always actually wanted to produce a game, on a professional level. So this is the game I'm gonna run with, because I think it
Hmm.
has a really strong concept. I think it's, not an overly complex game. I don't think it's gonna like, take years and years to develop. So
Hmm.
that's basically the game that I kind of like, hammered into a workable test play, and then I reached
Hmm.
out and started gathering team members and just kind of going from there. So I like to kind of mark the official start of production as actually almost exactly 1 year ago when I got, our project manager Ketra on, and we just went from there.
So, and obviously, when you're producing games, there are always challenges. I
Mhm.
mean, what are you? Have you run any production challenges when creating this?
Oh, plenty. I mean, I have published like very, kind of like small scale games on my own before this. This is like the first time I've actually, had team members that I've hired and, like had a whole bunch of like, original art made for it. So this is like, what I consider the big leagues. But, before this, I put my own stuff out for free online, and, I've got like a small like drive-through and itch store. And I think that like kind of the game that have in my byline before this is a game called Stars Fall Up, which is kind of like a game that I made as a zine format, an
Hmm.
actual physical zine that I actually sold at like zine fairs and stuff like that.
Nice.
And that was, yeah, that was literally just me spending hours just like painstakingly inking and writing everything, and yeah, which was great in its own way. But this is like a whole different world.
Hmm.
So like the challenges that have been interesting to deal with so far are like um, just like coordinating everything, because like
Hmm.
obviously I'm the writer and I'm the producer and I'm kind of the final say on everything. But this is my first time working with a team like this. This is my first time leading a team like this. So it's like, oh, what's the next step? Oh, right, we need to ask, this guy, the specifications for X, Y, and Z. So then we can go to this other person who can do this. And it's like figuring out that map, which is incredibly helpful also with a project manager who does the things that my brain doesn't do very well. So I can focus on the writing part. But also it's like figuring out marketing, because I'm not naturally a person who is spends a lot of their time on like Twitter talking to people. So like my following was pretty small when we started this. So building up that branding, building up that, community around us has been a pretty big challenge.
Yeah, yeah, I really can be. I've seen it a lot.
Yeah,
Uh, so now, Burnaway, yeah, I I have a story I will discuss off camera, but
sure.
which is something. The only reason I don't mention it is yeah, I'll talk to you about it when we're done. But
Yeah,
that's always great to have somebody who really appreciates your work, and it really helps motivate you to do more. So I look forward to seeing how everything turns out. I want a copy of it because I want to try it
excellent.
myself. It is something that is so unique in my book that it would be a great way to break up that Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder,
Hmm.
that kind of narrative. This is just something that's gonna be shocking to the system, though, I think. So I don't know. I tend to be a
I
very
hope so.
emotional person anyway. So
Yeah,
um yeah, I mean, I can imagine me writing for this and just being in tears, during the
yeah,
entire process. I'm not sure how many DMs out there cry at their table. I do all the time.
yeah. No,
Just
it's great.
because for me the theater of the mind can be so powerful.
Totally.
But I can't wait to see what the finished product looks like. And please let me know if you have any additional questions for me or you need any of my help. I will do whatever I can. But yeah, everybody out there, take a look at this. This is completely, in my book, a really unique concept. And if you're looking to shake things up at the table, I think it's a great game to do it with. And I will have all the links down below to the Kickstarter. Let me know if you need anything from me, and I will have links down below to all of the creations that you have out there. And I can't wait to see what happens.
Thank you. No, me too. I'm excited.